Okay, so first thing I was going to ask you about, how are you doing on your media use diaries? Anybody already spent a day just tracking what they're doing? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. Any thoughts on what you were up to? Or?
I just kind of tracked like what I do on a daily basis, just to kind of see like my use of media, and I find myself spending like an absurd amount of time on my phone.
Okay. Okay. Probably a lot of people will find that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I kind of want to cut that down because I kind of.
Well, remember, we're not getting into like what you should or shouldn't do with it. We're
just for my own use.
Just for your own use. It's like, whoa, that's a lot of time. Yeah. Did you break it down by applications that you're using?
Yeah, I was breaking down by like Snapchat and Instagram, and then any of the news like apps like CNN.
Okay. Oh, good.
Like the New Yorker or any of that stuff.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. So that would be that's exactly what we're after. So if I were to draw out, is this an erasable pen? I don't know. Is it Word Pilot? Whiteboard marker. Good. So if I were to draw out, sort of a record-keeping document or whatever, which is, could be very useful. You don't have to turn something like this in, but it could be useful. So it would be sort of so what day was it? Was it?
It was on Sunday.
Okay, so you did a weekend day.
Yeah.
Right, and then I would recommend. Remember, you're supposed to do 3 days. So let's say if you did day 1 on a weekend, you might do day 2 on a weekday, and then maybe day 3 on the the give it up day, if you want to call it that. Where you're tracking, this is for everybody, of course, you're tracking for what you, what things are like when you don't use that device. Are you compensating with something else? Is there like a secondary thing you go to? Do you buy the newspaper if you can't get your news online? You guys think you'd do that? Probably not, right? When was the last time most of us bought a newspaper? Except Mitchell, right? Mitchell, you consume newspaper.
The only people in my family that have newspapers are my grandparents.
Yeah, that I think is when you get into the older media, and today we'll be kind of drawing comparisons between a mass media era and the current era. It is people in an older demographic who continue on with those habits. Part of the way they understand us, I'm talking about the merchants of attention, the people who make their living off of gathering audiences and then selling them to other people, which is what the media basically do. Part of it is just habit. And there's a distressing amount of, of concepts within the industry. For instance, the least for quite a while, media programmers like TV programmers were operating not to give you the best thing or the thing you absolutely wanted, but instead the thing that you were least likely to find objectionable. Does that make sense? So what they were after was not the greatest of this narrow niche that you wanted something of. It was instead to give you something that wasn't going to offend you, turn you off, so you'd spend your time with them. And they would literally, say that. So it's kind of, well, why was TV so mediocre back in the day? Well, because they weren't trying to be great. They were trying to be the least offensive possible so you wouldn't change the channel, which is hard work too. So to come back to this, if this were my document, I might sort of say day 1 and then do a table like, okay, so what media was I using? Okay, so let's say the phone, and then maybe what app, if, however you lay this out, so it could be CNN, it could be, New York Times, it could be then BuzzFeed, something like that. And then, time. When were you using this? I don't know, 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. or something like that. And then, any comments after that, anything that you picked up about that, was using it at the same time as I was listening to music or watching TV or, doing something else. So, and you could make a little table out of this, to be, that's the way data gets collected. Ridiculously, totally true. In fact, these types of documents are, if you go back into, I don't know, the history of amateur naturalism, I don't know why we go there, but just people who decided, let's count the number of coyotes out in the acres and stuff like that. And people would develop these little, grids and documents and share that. And historians and naturalists actually look back on that. It's science. This is science. You can do science right here of a type, right? It's not like put 4 things in a beaker and watch them explode. But this is, kind of an organized gathering of data. So remember, this thing is due on January 31st, I think. So you really have about, what does this due? It's due February 1st. February 1st. Okay, I'm a day off. So February 1st, so that is 10 days from now. So I'd say get into the data gathering, maybe you could already start tomorrow or this week on a weekday, and then get one day on the weekend this weekend, and then figure out what you want to give up. So that this is done, by next week. That'll give you a couple of days to think over your analysis, right? Because you're not turning in your data, but after you do your data, then you're looking at, the types of reflection where there are, questions to help you on, but sort of like, first off, any legitimate surprises, in terms of, well, yeah, I knew I'd spend all my time on my phone, but I didn't realize I spent quite that much time on that particular app or something like that. Well, where did all this go? I thought I was making it bigger, but I didn't. So it's just there. How do your media choices relate to your interests, personal identity, and such? So, there's a chance just to think about, why you use what you use, what you get out of it. As I said, there could be a really long list. It's like, even if you just say, well, I like something, it's like, why do you like it? How does it make you feel? Do you ever use it as a kind of a social exchange? Do you ever talk to other people about it? Does it fit in with your interests? Maybe your interests are media. Maybe they're not. Maybe it's just more like the topic that you're looking at is really interesting. And then think of yourself as part of a group, right? It's like, okay, are you rather like everybody else, do you think? Or are you, unique in, maybe Mitchell's unique in that he's, reading the odd newspaper. That's totally true for your demographic, you would be. So that'd be interesting, You could think also of your social surrounding. At the heart of it all, of course, is the individual. We all believe that we're unique and important as individuals, and it's true, we are. But social science, this type of science tends to look at people as part of groups, part of classes of people, and so then try to think through, are you, of your age group, of your gender, is this, are you a guy who's a happy consumer of Powerpuff Girls or something like that. It's like makes you somewhat unique as well. So these may be things that you want to go into. And then finally, I think this one is definitely designed to create something different going on from what's usually going on by asking you to give up the medium, and so then think through how that felt, what the consequences were, maybe it, so the distinction between that is simply, well, I felt I might be missing out if I wasn't on the app that all of my friends are communicating with me on, so that there's a feeling, but there may also be actual consequences, I missed the barbecue because I didn't hear about it, because I didn't have, my phone with me, God damn you, teacher, and that kind of thing, and so there you go. Questions or thoughts on this? I would imagine the majority of people are going to give up something on their phone. But is anybody thinking of giving up something else that's not their phone? In other words, Parker? And then, okay, is it Ethan or no? Andrew? Yeah. Okay, Andrew, yeah.
Video games, yeah.
Video games? Okay. Is it be playing on a console? All right. Okay. I should have thought of that one. And Parker?
I'll give up.
It's supposed to be your favorite or dominant medium.
So. If it's not video games, it's probably just sports, any sports, soccer, baseball.
This has to be media. Yeah, so I'm glad we talked about this.
Definitely.
Oh, I'm sorry. You watching sports? Is that what you meant?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I thought, oh, he's going to give up playing soccer.
Oh, no.
no. My bad. Yeah. Okay. So you give up watching sports.
Yeah.
All right. We had Mitchell. Then
It's the same, the
Natalia.
iPad and the iPhone for you?
iPad and the iPhone? No. I mean, you probably use them quite differently, right?
Yeah, I think I'm using more the iPad than the iPhone. I spend
Okay.
a lot of time with the iPad because then I can read like news and then also like play some games and I don't know, Netflix, I have Netflix there.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
So you'll be giving up the iPad. Okay.
Yeah.
And then Mitchell and then Sam. Yeah.
Let's see, my dominant source of media is mostly my phone, but I'm also going to probably give up my laptop for that day.
Two at once?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Actually, yeah, I got 2 laptops and a phone, so I'm going to give
Okay.
up my 2 laptops and a phone because I actually went through like a whole entire month without my laptop.
Did it break or something?
No, I just didn't feel like it.
Oh, wow.
So I'm going to be
Okay.
pretty used to it.
Okay.
I
You know,
use it pretty equally too. So yeah.
all right, thank you. Well, I have something in mind, a reflection, but let's hear from Sam first. And then,
Message boards such as 4chan, 8chan, and Reddit.
okay, where you spend a lot of
I
time.
spend a good amount of time on them.
Yeah, okay. It'll be interesting to see what you feel you're missing out from all of that, right? 'Cause-
Probably a lot of shit posts.
Possibly. We distinguish between synchronous and asynchronous media, which I'm just selling some ideas that I'll bring up in the PowerPoint. But Sam's idea of giving up what we call an asynchronous medium, which is the distinction is it live or can you get to it afterwards, right? So synchronous media is pretty much, I mean, think of a football game or something. It's on live. It has very little value afterwards because you find out who wins. I mean, some of us will look at a game delayed, but not many. And then, Sam looking at message boards and stuff, we would think that, I mean, I don't know, Sam, the question I guess is how important is it to be on the board as stuff is coming in, or is it okay to get to it later?
It's okay to get to it later generally, but not too far later because threads are archived after a period of inactivity.
Okay. So, interesting. So with some media, it may be less costly to give it up versus, synchronous media. So synchronous, it's happening live, basically, or with very little delay. Asynchronous, you can get stuff later, and it's not such a big deal. You may pay some penalty for, by penalty I mean it may diminish the experience, but there's a whole class of media like books or stuff like that where after their moment of publication you can still pick them up later, versus radio and television, the electronic media of then the past were definitely synchronous. So that's an interesting thing to think about, and be interested in hearing what
I don't
Sam.
think anyone's really going to miss me because it's an anonymous message board anyway.
Is that right? So, well,
You don't even have a screen name, it just says click the caption here, I'm not a robot, post by anonymous.
do you have to do that for every post? You have to do a caption?
If you have an account there, which I for whatever reason don't, you have to click capture every time.
Oh, okay. Well, you have to really want to get into it. I guess you're putting a little bit of a hurdle there. Maybe the quality is better that way.
Not really.
Not really.
It's always some shit show.
I think you engage in a lot of filtering on these media, of your own. Like, is that useful? I don't know. What was I thinking on my online class last night? I was reading a lot of people who were talking about their relationship to the computer. It was one of those icebreaker conversations or something. But I was realizing how even 5 years ago, people would have been using their laptop a lot more for all of their, online communication, and it's become so much the phone is the dominant thing. And the class I'm talking about is BCST 119, which is, a basic digital production class where you do some Photoshop, you do some audio, you do some video editing and stuff. And, as I'm reading through it, I'm realizing that for many people, they're using the phone all day long, but not necessarily the laptop. And while there are some, multimedia production apps on your phone, most of them are extremely limited compared to the full professional versions that you'll have on your
And a whole lot less
laptop.
buggy.
A whole lot less buggy on the.
I've had to reinstall it. I'm actually in the process of reinstalling the Creative Cloud right now.
Uh-huh.
Just because of some dumb glitch that made it think that my subscription had cancelled when it actually hadn't.
Darn. Sam, we can't converse like this. We have to do the hand up thing, okay? But I appreciate it. And I myself had troubles with the Creative Cloud last year. It was horrible. But yeah, so just thinking, even just reading over those comments, I was feeling like, my goodness, how quickly the transition happens, and how how hopefully these phones and these miniaturized devices will become as powerful as our laptops, so that we don't have to spread our learning and all the time we spend on a whole bunch of different devices. If you want, it'd be wonderful if you just get used to one OS and have it all work for you. Anyway. Anybody else think of anything while we were up there as to what you were giving up? Anyone giving up anything? So I've heard games, obviously apps on the phone for sure. Message boards, that's an interesting one. Yeah, Parker?
Another one that I just thought about while he was explaining, like I'm on Snapchat, I'm on Instagram, that might be some people's only way of communicating with you. So you might have to give that specific, if anybody in the room has specific.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, there's definitely a penalty to pay if you get off of that and you're not able to contact those people in any other way. Yeah, or even if you could call them up, but do you ever call them up? It was like, hey, dude, why are you calling me?
People think I'm crazy, but
yeah.
I'll be calling people.
That's right. That's another bit of evidence as to how the kind of social expectations that grow up in your particular group. I keep talking about penalties or something, but it does appear out of the ordinary when all of a sudden you communicate in a different way. And you have to explain yourself or something, and then then it's like, oh, okay, that is a little bit of a penalty. Yeah.
Not even an issue.
Yeah, but in a sense, life can sometimes be just like a constant set of tiny little hurdles you're jumping over, and if you don't have to jump over that one more, then again, as I said, the merchants of attention, they've got you. You're now playing in the channel that they want you to play in, right?
Exactly.
And then after that, they're monitoring your email or whatever, and they know what you like, and then they can sell to you. Whereas if you're just phoning people, they're not exactly allowed to listen to what you say, right? So, it's, I don't want to, I'm not paranoid about it, but a lot of times that's what's going on, right? When you're using Facebook or Google or anything like that, you're using Gmail. They're parsing all of your text and your profile and everything you do and everything you like and stuff, and they're selling that. That's the new commerce there. Yeah.
That's exactly like if you were to go and search something on your phone on Google repeatedly, it would go and show up on like a sponsored ad on like your social media app, because it feeds through your phone. It's like, oh, you're searching this, we're gonna add it on your social media, so you see it there too. It's like it's kind of weird how it picks up like that. It almost makes you think like there's actually people like feeding that through on your phone and everything.
Yeah. Are other people, have you had that feeling? It's like, whoa, I'm surprised,
You
that.
start to notice
It's weird. It's really weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, Andrew, what did you say?
targeted advertisements.
Yes, exactly. This is the outcome of it. Yeah, targeted advertisements that they're just so much better now at of course of knowing what you might be interested in buying. And of course, on the content side, what it means is a carefully curated news feed where it starts to only show you the types of things that it knows that you like to read and see already. So, what's the likelihood you'll run into something that'll change your mind, or that will get you out of your little set of things you think about and ways that you see the world. That's. I think actually Sam's message boards probably, there's more likelihood that you'll, crash into other points of view in that type of environment than you will, in your Facebook feed or something like that, which is so carefully now streamlined to just give you what you usually want. Sam?
That's more or less it.
Sorry?
That's more or less it.
I'm not getting.
That's more or less it.
That's more or less it. Yes. Meaning that's what you like about it, or?
I'm currently I've gotten off track a little bit, to be honest. Right now, I was just to get back.
Shame on you.
Shame on me. I'm currently on the 4chan banned board, which is the international random.
Okay.
Now, this isn't streamlined like your Facebook. This isn't personalized like your Facebook feed is. This is everything that everyone has to say.
Okay. Okay. Got it. So it's
We'll now close this tab.
it's not filtered by an algorithm. It's not kind of streamlined just for you. It's the raw fire hose of thought. Interesting.
Oh yeah, you should see Paul.
Okay. Don't lead me down into this.
Politically incorrect board.
Oh my God. Did somebody else?
What you hear about?
Did you have your hand up? No? Yeah, okay. All right. Okay. Let me see. Right. Well, we will, of course, come back to targeted advertising and some of the, the controversies about, about the algorithmic manipulation of our attention now, if you want to call it that. That's not what the textbook calls it. So keeping it simple, just the way that all these apps can now, interact with our image, our information requests, and just, anticipate and give us what we want, right? And there's been a certain amount of, I read a scathing letter from the publisher of the San Francisco Chronicle. I think this came out about a week ago in response to Zuckerberg's, the CEO of Facebook, his assertion that they're going to change the Facebook algorithm to surface more material from your friends, family in your feed than the way it was going, which was a lot of corporate media and news items and such, which has publishers up in arms. What was interesting about the publisher of the Chronicle's take, obviously they're scared or whatever because it's a crazy percentage of people who get their news directly through Facebook or other social media. But she put it in terms of responsibility, and I thought that was interesting. We're taking the big picture view today. So the responsibility is if you guide people or train people or open the door for them to change their habits such that they abandon newspapers, even abandon Google News, and instead go to your social media platform to get their news, which then brings along all the news providers, all those businesses, all those journalists and stuff are now orienting their business to you through Facebook, and then you decide you're going to switch the algorithm, which is going to hurt them by who knows how much percentage, 10%, 20%, whatever it is that they lose. They stand to lose an enormous amount, right? So she's bringing it up in terms of responsibility. You have trained, the public to do this, and now you're going to flip a switch, and you're going to change it all up. You're going to change the underlying rules of the game. What do you think of who's powerful there? Is the San Francisco Chronicle powerful? Is Facebook powerful? Is the individual who just balancing that out? Who do you think has more power there? Your choices are the Chronicle, the reader, the average reader, or Facebook. Who do you think is more powerful in this situation? Parker?
I wouldn't know specifically, but I'm choosing either the reader or the Chronicle.
Really? Is that just because you're thinking, I don't know, it seems to me, I wanted to hear Facebook. I'll tell you why. Because it seems to me that Facebook, now that it has the audience, everyone who wants to provide news to them has to go through Facebook. When Facebook decides to change things up a little bit, all of a sudden, both the audience and the Chronicle, for instance, are caught. I mean, whoa, they're not going to see these posts the way we thought they would anymore. They're going to see, more pictures from Aunt Mary. That's very powerful. Okay, so no harm done. Everyone has their own little bit of power. The audience doesn't have to go to Facebook to read the news. The Chronicle still makes its money in many other ways. But there's a lot of other news organizations which truly are, creatures of social media. They wouldn't exist without that kind of infrastructure. Chronicle has it pretty good. But many others don't. So I guess just the point is, one could say, well, it's business, right? It's just business. Facebook is a very successful business. You shouldn't condemn that. On the other hand, if it becomes such a central part of the news and information business and of people's lives, then you just change stuff like that, it's incredibly consequential now. Anyhow, I will probably post a link to that letter, just because I think it's certainly very important news. So the message here, the meta message is just get on this in the next few days. Do your data capture. Remember, this is not what you're turning into me. You're turning into me what you think about all this once you've captured it. But do it, don't fake it, and I'm sure you'll come up with some interesting ideas that you may not have had beforehand. I'm hoping anyway, because that would have, I don't know, it'll just be better. You can understand stuff better.
And in the document we have to send you, we have to do the chart and then write all the
No chart. No chart. No.
This is
You
just for us?
The chart is just for you, so
Okay.
that you see the trends and stuff like that. And then you say, I was really shocked by how much time I spent with this app or whatever.
Okay.
And you could say, I spent 2 hours with it. By the way, anyone still consume radio? Okay. Mitchell's big on legacy stuff. Only 3 people out of the whole room. Now, that's interesting. There is still a radio industry. Pardon me?
Internet radio, does that count?
It should, and it does, yes. Okay. And Anna as well. Andrew, did you want to say something, or you
I
just...
listened to old broadcasts from like the 80s.
Really?
Casey.
Interesting. Okay. Anyone listen to old time radio, like 1950s and 40s? I mean, there's
They
tons.
still actually did all the acting.
Right, and sponsors, it was the GE radio hour. So you'd have an actor would stop and it was time for a break, and then the same actor would start saying, "Have you ever thought of changing your light bulbs?" It's just, it's interesting. That's the way they used to fund these things, without commercials, but with sponsorships and stuff. We're back to that. What's that?
Product placement.
Product placement, yeah, back in the day. And they used to do it with such a kind of eventually they were pretty cynical about it. It was just oh, here's another message from our sponsor, gee. Oh, that's interesting. It's cool. You can get all these, but you're listening to them on YouTube, the Casey stuff?
They do it on the Sirius XM radio.
Oh, okay. They have a channel devoted to that?
They just have an 80s channel that they play.
Oh, okay.
He does all his countdowns every week.
Oh,
They
interesting.
reuse them.
Interesting. And that makes you unique as well, because in the industry thinking you should be like a man of 50 years old or something to be wanting to listen to that.
I always knew Casey Kasem as the voice of Shaggy in Scooby-Doo.
Right. You guys have a lot of cultural reference out there, I was thinking, young people, social media.
Hanna-Barbera was my child.
Awesome. Mitchell?
I still listen to KCBS News whenever my father takes me to his car and stuff. So I still listen to KCBS News.
All right. The old school.
Yeah, because I never thought because back then when I was a little kid, I used to be really bored with the news. But now it's pretty interesting.
Oh, yeah. I see it with my kids. It's what is this crap? Turn it off. I'm hoping that they're there. Cool. We're on to the slides. And I'm just checking the time. I still, beginning of the semester, I never quite know when we're going to end. So let's see.
5 more minutes.
30? 5 more minutes? Yeah, right. Sorry, thank you. Okay. I thought 5 minutes. You're fooling me. You want out of here, right? That's it. Okay, chapter 1 of this textbook, right? Which, by the way, if you want more depth, there's way too much information to humanly present this in a lecture. That's why they write it down, because writing is such an efficient medium for storing information. Talking is for different stuff. But anyhow, so I run through what I think are the highlights. If you want to know more about, you saw it on a slide, remember there's several copies of this book on reserve in the library, or of course you're free to rent or purchase it if you want. So you can find out more about this if you wish. So as I said, this week is kind of like a big picture overview before we jump into many chapters about more specific media systems and stuff. We'll do history for a couple of weeks after this week. This one kind of bounces back between thinking about the height of mass media, and we'll come back again to talk, define that a bit better, and the current situation where we've got mass media mixed up with very personalized media as well. Here on this first slide, we connect all forms of media together as forms of communication, and realize that there were smoke signals and you could send messages by pigeons, and therefore definitely the world really changed with systems of writing. That's certainly something important. In one of my classes, one of my professors knew somebody who had an accident which disabled their ability to read, and they had kind of retrained themselves and become a truck driver. This person had the most phenomenal memory because they couldn't write stuff down and read it, and so part of spending an hour with this very interesting person was just a kind of a game where we gave him like I don't know, 40 random details one after the other, and he could just pull them up one after the other because he kind of trained his mind that way. And you could think that prior to writing systems, everybody had to work that way. You had a culture where you'd tell stories to each other over and over again. If you read Homer, if you read the classic Greeks, they were coming out of that kind of culture where eventually someone took those stories and wrote them down. But prior to that, they'd just been reading them, and they'd been remembering them and telling them to each other. That's how culture was kind of communicated that way. But when we get into writing, then you get into it's a big deal because you can write stuff down. You get history. We can look back and see stuff that's written. We can decipher, those ancient languages and get some idea of what, the way people thought at that time. So history as the documentation of culture is tied to communication technology. And by technology, I mean an alphabet in that case. Or even easier things, just like numeracy, keeping track of how many chickens you sold to somebody else on a little scroll or something. And then, getting more into modern history, and at least modern European history, this timeline, which is in your book, which, basically shows pace of innovation of, modern communication technology. Looking at this, maybe with your eyes slightly unfocused, what would you say about the rhythm at which technological change happens in communication tech? Andrew?
Well, all the innovation really started during the mid-century 1900s.
There's a lot picks up over here. Yeah. And rhythmically, in terms of the lines and stuff, if you think of just something happening and then a few years going by, where's it all clustered?
It all clusters in the 20s.
Yeah, it all moves, incredible innovation happening, here after CD, PC, DVD, HSD, internet, DTV, HDTV. What is the kind of unifying principle about all of this stuff?
It's all audio.
It's all
recorded
It's recorded, yeah, but most of these communication technologies were ways of recording stuff. But what's different from here than, let's say, TV or radio? It's CDs, PCs, DVDs, DTVs. What's the D? Digital, exactly. So in the textbook, or just anyone can see it, there's a revolution in print, or in writing, let's say. When you can write stuff down, changes the world. But, maybe it's an exaggeration. Probably it is, but let's make an exaggeration. When digitization comes in, there is another potential revolution. In a sense that, the alphabet gave us the ability to take language, speech, and break it down into, words and letters, a system of recording, which was pretty flexible. You could take anything that you could say, you could break it down into 26, 27 characters, because there's a space. You could break it down and you could, record all speech with that. You missed tone, you missed volume, you missed character, you lost a lot. But you can take everything and boil it down to 26 letters plus a space. And when printing came around, they figured out, we can, make little lead letters, and you can smack them into a space, and then you can print, and so you could, great, the alphabet made that possible. You get into digitization, everything can be, boiled down to a 1 or a 0. Really? When you my class that I was teaching online last is BCST 119, digital media skills. It's like text. It becomes 1s and 0s in the computer. A photograph, it gets broken down into pixels, and then each pixel gets filtered out into red, green, and blue. And then you got 255 shades of red, green, and blue in most of your color systems and stuff. And each of those 255s is just a number, and it becomes a 1 or a 0. Audio, it's like your song is broken down into a sample, samples. Each sample is measured out, it turns into digits. Those streams of digits are just stored as 1s and 0s, So this is, in a way, when you get hold of that kind of ability, then, you can connect that to a computer network and just send down, it's like, I did this research into digital radio when I was in grad school, which was a long time ago. So, and one thing really blew my mind was I went into it thinking, okay, I'm going to learn about radio, and it's going to have this great quality because it's digital. And then I got there, and they were talking to me about sending advertising coupons over the air. And then they said, and there may be the possibility of specialty video services, like we could beam kids shows on TV into people's cars. And this was like 1996, I was doing this. And I realized, once you've got a digital pipe, you can put anything down it. Doesn't matter, right? When we had radio and television, you had to buy a radio, and you couldn't get TV on your radio, right? But now everything comes down the same pipe. And in your phone or your computer, it can show everything back to you, Of course that's going to lead to, incredible amounts of innovation. That's what's going on, and it hasn't stopped, So, and it's very profitable too for some companies. So the tech timeline accelerates as we move this way, and the textbook, I think, cites Moore's Law. Has anyone heard of Moore's Law? It's just processing. It was like a pseudo law about processing power in computers. It's like every year it's going to double, and things are just going to get faster and faster. They bring that up. It's certainly not scientific. So we talked about the printing press, where they took the alphabet, turned it into little lead printing letters, and boom, all of a sudden, in the 1500s, you could print the Bible. Prior to that, you had what did you have before you could print the Bible?
It was all writing, feather pen.
Monks, you had scriptoria, right? Yeah, they sat there and they painted those things. Sam, was that what you wanted to say?
That was basically what I wanted to say, but I just wanted to say also that I have actually seen these handwritten books in real life. In museums in England, obviously.
Yeah.
And in France.
Yeah.
And in Italy. There's a lot of them in Italy.
They're-
Especially near the Vatican.
Okay, all right. There is a movie called The Name of the Rose, which is an old movie now, but it is a kind of a Sherlock Holmes thing set in a medieval scriptorium, and someone's getting poisoned through the paint. They had to mix all their paint and stuff. Anyhow, so prior to that, books were incredibly valuable because they had to be hand drawn or copied, and people made mistakes, and so you had foremen who would have to read it over, and very few people were literate in that world as well, because it cost so much to get a hold of print and a book and stuff like that you wouldn't even have the opportunity to practice. But when you get the Gutenberg printing press out there, now they can set the pages of the book and just print them out like that. It's pretty slow by today's standards, but you can do that. And of course, being a religious culture all through Europe, the Bible being the big book, that's the one that they printed out the most, and it changed a lot of stuff. It changed It brought more opportunities for literacy. It also, in some ways, took the monopoly of power that the literate had and started to spread it out amongst everybody else. When everybody else was able to start reading books, you could get different ideas. You could get, the growth of a difference of opinion on paper. And so there's a really amazing history, which we won't go into in this class, about those early developments and stuff. There's a wonderful book called The Cheese and the Worms, which is written by an Italian historian, where he was able to get a hold of the list of books that were in the bookshelf of this miller who lived in a little town. So a miller, a guy who made flour. So he had enough money to go to Venice and buy books every once in a while and bring them back. And eventually, and all these records come from the Catholic Church because he was eventually tried several times as a heretic and then killed, executed for his points of view. And so there are all of these interrogations were carefully recorded and written out, and they're part, I don't know if they're at the Vatican, but they're on record. And this historian went and pulled them all out and read them all. And the book is so fascinating because he said, what the hell was going on in this guy's mind that he said the world was not created by God, but was actually like a kind of a bacterium that grew up like worms growing out of rotten cheese. This was his idea. And by looking at all the books on his bookshelf, which were works of philosophy and speculation back in those days, he said, oh, maybe this miller read this book and thought this and that and so on. And he was able to piece together this crazy mindset of this fellow. And, you get the idea of what it was like to be a 15th century, miller in a small town. Anyway, I digress way too much. We moved on to the electronic media. So the telegraph was a very important development, which allowed us to send point-to-point communications down a wire. And so this, again, brought a lot of different changes to society. For instance, you got very quick news about how much a certain product was selling for in, let's say Pittsburgh, and if you found out that, flour was cheap in Pittsburgh, you could go buy some and bring it back somewhere else and sell it for more. So these, there are actual real serious business implications about being able to, get connected up through the telegraph. But this was what we call a one-to-one model, which means that, you'd be in an office in Pittsburgh, and you would send that information to your business partner somewhere else, and you'd say, hey, it's cheap, let's buy some. But what we're looking at is the growth of what was known as mass communication. So this would be the idea that from one sender, many receivers could get this message. And so the original form of mass communication would have been the book, right? Gutenberg prints the Bible and gets to send it all over Europe. And so from one source, Gutenberg, working from a very well-regarded intellectual property, the Bible, but that got, sent out to a whole mass of people. That wasn't electronic communication. There was no electricity involved, but it was mass communication. So mass media use mechanical or electronic devices to deliver messages to a mass audience. That means a lot of people. You've heard of the masses? I don't like the word the masses because it kind of is being used to, just like the unwashed bunch of people out there. It's kind of elitist sounding thing. But in this case, we don't mean that. We just mean that there are a lot of people in the audience, a whole lot. And they're getting information from one point, Now, when you bring electronics into this, you get into this synchronous type of media as well, which remember we said would be like radio, TV, right? Versus asynchronous, a book would have been a good example of that because it could be published and you get it for 10 years later. But radio and TV, especially before we could record this stuff, because at the beginning of both of those media, we couldn't record stuff, at least not easily. They could actually cut like a vinyl disc, except they weren't vinyl, they were lacquer in those days. But they could, they could basically cut a record of you at the same time as you were on the radio. But in TV, in the early days, there wasn't even videotape. We had to like set up a camera and film the television monitors. So it was really tough. So mostly those were synchronous media, meaning again, it's sort of, so next week we'll go into the history of both of these, radio and TV, but in the early days, Marconi, who's, probably the biggest name associated with early radio, there were a bunch of people involved in the invention. But Marconi's brainwave, if you want, was looking at radio, figuring out, well, what could you do with this crazy phenomenon? And he realized you could send Morse code, which was what the code, right? So you would send that through the telegraph, right, early on. Then they realized, well, you could send this over the radio waves as well. And so they called that wireless telegraphy. But that remained, right, a one-to-one type of communication. When Marconi thought this up, he thought, this will be great. If you're on a boat, you can radio back to land and you can go deet, 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 deet. You can communicate back to land. You don't need a wire. But he was still thinking of a one-to-one type of communication system. But when he started bringing this all over the world and trying to interest other governments, other corporations about it and such, they started to realize, well, the signal goes out everywhere. As many people as we want could actually pick this up. And when they managed to get audio going out on there, so not just Morse code, but actual people talking, then they realized, oh, we could have one studio and serve, hundreds or thousands or even millions of people. And so they realized, oh, this could be a mass medium as well. So that's an interesting bit of history and a good lesson for us. When you look back in the past, you think it just was as it was and that's the way it is and it always has been. But no, when these inventions are being created, there's a lot of uncertainty. People don't really know what they're going to be used for necessarily. And so it's an interesting thing to look at. And if you go, for instance, to the New York Times website, you get 10 free looks before they bring down the paywall and ask you to subscribe. But you can look back and you can look back to 1857 and you can even see they've taken a photo of the actual newspaper and you can see in like them asking questions. Well, this new thing, radio, we call it radiography or something. And what will we do with this? And how will we fund this? And so if you go back and look at the history, you realize none of this was set in stone. People are searching and finding. So television, radio, I don't know what the heck is with this slide. Radio, they realized it was mass media. Television, they realized it could be a mass medium. In other words, one to many. And then the internet kind of blows it all up because you've got such flexibility in it. And we'll get to, whoa, there's the model for the internet. So we'll come back to that in a sec. Let's have the mass media model, because this is a nice, simple model. And you've all heard about senders and receivers, right? In this case, it's a little more technical, this one. But this is a model that was, it's associated with Shannon and Weaver. And they were two engineers at the Bell Laboratories, and their job was to figure out how bad the quality could be on a telephone line and still be acceptable. So they developed this model and said, okay, we're going to have a transmitter, we're going to have a receiver, and in the midst of it all is noise. And we want to know how much noise is too much noise so that people are, they can't understand the information that's being sent along this line. And this could go for any communication medium. And in fact, they, this has become the kind of standard mass media model. That if we're talking radio, there is, for instance, a government program wants to do an advertisement to help people, teach them, wear your seatbelt. And so they'll go to the radio, they'll pay to have that message transmitted. It'll go down this channel, 106.1. it'll get to the radio receiver in somebody's house, and they will get the message here. There are various variations of this for human communication, but that's how the message travels in mass communication. One thing missing from this model, a key thing, the ability of the receiver to send back some information to the sender. Do you guys know the concept, the idea, the word about that? Sorry?
Feedback.
Feedback. Thank you, Andrea. Exactly. So what's missing here is feedback. We've got the sender, sorry, I'm getting confused, the receiver, and the ability to feed back, the receiver to send back to the sender. So thinking about mass media, radio and television, what form of feedback would there be? Let's say you're driving to school and you're hearing something on the radio. How could you feed back to the radio station? Yeah?
They have those like phone-in numbers.
Yes, there was that.
The radio.
So phoning in would be a form of feedback?
Well, sometimes you can use like something like Twitter or Facebook and write a comment or something like
Yeah,
that.
absolutely. And it could have been blogs,
Yeah,
10
yeah.
years ago, you could have blogged about how crappy it was.
Yeah.
But now,
Twitter
you
is
could tweet out about it. What a stupid thing that was to happen on, so, right? So you could have just a different
Social
media
media.
channel, right? If we were talking newspapers way back when, I know it's not an electronic medium, but people used to write letters to the editor, okay? I think we can agree that, now if we put in social media here, I think this has made it, a lot easier. And again, if you could just go to their Facebook page and you could post up there and they would have to deal with it, or you could, in a more open environment, you could tweet about it or something. But I think the point being that in our current day and age, feedback is a hell of a lot easier than it used to be, And if we're still talking about mass communication, because the other thing is, the internet has brought the ability to kind of scale this, so that you may have, you may post a video which is, 20 people watch it. You could post a video of your kid's birthday party like I do, and you share it with a few people, and that's it, right? So it's basically a one-to-one communication. But on that platform, it could scale as well. Let's say my kid, says something funny, like some kind of swear word or something, and then all of a sudden it goes viral, I wish, and there's like a million views of this or something, and then all of a sudden I'm sitting at home thinking, could I do more of these? What can I do? How can I monetize my kid? Right? And so this, pardon me, what's that, Sam?
Then you get things like the Spider-Man Elsa fan.
Yes.
For those of you who don't know what that is, you don't want to.
Oh gosh, okay. I was going to offer to pull it up on here, but I think that would probably be a dangerous move on my part.
Yeah.
Yes. All right, fair enough. So it's this network communication which allows this, what I'm calling it scalability, which again, I'm not sure if it's a word in the textbook, but what I mean by that is you can go literally from a one-to-one to a one to many, through many of the platforms that the internet makes possible. And so it's become far more complicated to try to map that out, right? Mass media was pretty simple. Current day communication is, here we go. This is a slide that I wanted. So from one source to many is the mass communication model. The original books or newspapers, and then radio and television. But of course, the internet digital model allows for many interconnections and this what I'd say scalability. It may start off here, but then it grows and grows. It can grow and grow as much as there is interest really amongst people. Things can be republished, scraped and reappear somewhere else, it's very complicated to draw a model of that. But what we're trying to do is just talk about all the the differences that the digitization and the internet bring to us. Here's a better model of communication in itself, in that this one tries to account for basically the kind of human work that goes on after a message is received, even in a mass communication environment. Let's say we go back to the government with their PSA about you got to wear your seatbelt or you'll be in an accident and die. Well, yes, the sender-receiver model tells us about how the PSA gets produced and sent to you on your radio or TV. And we did account for feedback where we could write back to them and say, no way am I ever going to wear a seatbelt, you fascist government, whatever. But there's also a lot of work that goes on here afterwards when this hits the radio, and there's a whole bunch of people who listen to this, and they might start talking to each other. So they're not necessarily radioing each other. They're maybe just talking conversationally. So this is what this part of the model is trying to get at, which is being neglected because of our technological bias in media theory and such. So what we're trying to account for here is all the people talking to each other, saying, "Yeah, did you hear that, man? It's true. My uncle got killed in a car crash. We should wear those seatbelts." And then, showing up at school and little Johnny hasn't got his seatbelt on. How could you? They could get killed, And then, so all of that is, of course, very influential. And so it's not just all about the messaging of getting your PSA out on the radio. You also should account for what people do afterwards, the activity in an audience, And now, of course, in the internet days, in this model, the audience is actually the product in many cases. If we take, again, the example of a message board, you go there in order to read the content generated by the users. YouTube is another one, obviously, right? So the user becomes the producer at the same time, which is wonderfully democratic. It has mixed results. It has, upended journalism. As yet, the kind of budget constraints of making television and movies means that there are some amazing low-budget indie productions. Anybody seen a little film called Tangerine, shot on an iPhone? You're nodding, yeah? Sean Baker, I think, is the name of the director. I highly check it out. Somebody making a film on an iPhone, it's riveting. It doesn't look like it was made on an iPhone either. Anyhow, so there's this whole revolution and possibility of user-generated content as well, which means basically the audience becomes the creator as well, which is interesting development. Prior, again, back in the classic days of mass media, it was incredibly hard to become, the person who, a producer or a director or something like that. And it may still be hard to actually arrive at a position where you can make a living at it or work on, really high-budget material, but you can start obviously producing media tomorrow, and most people are, and they're putting it, they're distributing it too. So incredible, all these changes. Any thoughts? That's my big riff about media, the development of digitization and such and such. Do you guys feel that the mass media has a future? Do you think that people will still be watching television or listening to radio even 10 years from now? What do you think? Well, you guys were Sam first, then Andrew.
My view is that Hollywood is going to be obsolete within 20 years.
Okay.
Well, you see, I have a YouTube channel, 14,000 subscribers.
Good for you.
Well, 10 million views, but they still demonetize my entire channel because some don't.
You complained about that last time. All right, but however, congrats on 14,000 subscribers. That's fantastic.
There's another group, another YouTube channel called Corridor Digital. I don't know if any of you guys have heard of them. They make some absolutely excellent low-budget films, like low-budget and high production value in terms of post-production. But yeah, anyway.
But you think that's going to steal Hollywood's audience
I think
eventually?
that low budget is the future of film, because it's gotten to a point where I have the technology to edit, in this case, a movie on here.
Yeah.
The grand total of this was, of all of my equipment in total that I use, is somewhere over $1,000.
Yeah. So as we were saying, this allows
A massive-
the audience to become the creator as well. It
Yes.
breaks down so many of those barriers.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Eventually, it's going to become so easy to make films that films will become there'll be no such thing as Hollywood anymore. In fact, like
I gotta stop you there. We hit the time barrier, Andrew, and then yourself. Yeah.
So I don't think it's going anywhere because the media is already out there. It's already been here for a very long time. So there's too much content for it to just disappear.
I see.
It's always going to be around, and there's always going to be people are always going to make their own content and everything. That's getting even more popular. But I still think there's going to be a big industry in it. It's not going to go away. It's just going to be improved upon as much as possible.
Okay. Interesting, because as you're talking, I'm realizing, okay, we could break this down into industrial structures. Like when Sam says Hollywood's finished, what we're talking about really is that form of production, where you've got to get together $50 million and have a pilot and have this. And what you're talking not only about industrial structures, but also about basically the catalog. There's like the Casey Kasem is out there. It's like everything is now available to us, but it may be on a broadcast channel one day and on Hulu the next day, and 20 years from now, the equivalent of Netflix or whatever library is out there. So you're saying that's not going away. And then the other thing we should think about is, given that it's infinitely scalable now, there are still going to potentially be mass media events within a technical framework which could be as one-to-one as you want. But now I'd like to hear from you, because a fresh face, a new voice.
Respond to what Sam was saying, the
Yeah.
thing about Hollywood becoming obsolete. That's pretty much happened with the music industry. Just anyone can just record and put something on like SoundCloud, and people get like record deals on SoundCloud.
Yeah.
Like you look at, especially in like hip hop and stuff, and like underground scenes, like coming to like popularity either off like a viral video or just like a viral song on like SoundCloud. And in the last like 3 years, you can like just count how many people have come off these like internet mediums.
Yeah.
them dead ass SoundCloud rappers and their tunes.
It has been totally transformed, right? Yeah, and so some people regret the passage of the mass media production model, but you guys don't seem upset by it. Yeah.
Well, because I'm benefiting from it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think they are both right, but I'm like kind of concerned about the radio, like live radio, because I think people, it's all around, right? But people, it's like more now, okay, they listen to radio just maybe in the car or something like this when they're driving. But now it's starting more like, okay, I'm just going to connect my music, and they're not even listening to the radio. So about TV and movies, all that, yeah, right. It's going to be around. It's going to be like an improvement. But what about the radio? I don't think it's going to be like the same with the radio. It's a different thing. It's
I would I mean, I think we should always. We traffic in generalizations, but I think we should also get down and be as specific as we can and want about this type of thing. Radio itself is, it's interesting because it's managed to adapt quite well to, for instance, when television appeared, radio completely changed and turned into kind of a music provision device, and now that most people are streaming music some other way, I think radio is adapting into more of a talk medium, and then there's also the idea again, you're quite right that radio continues to sort of hang on just because it's in everybody's car, and so we'll see if there is still a radio industry, and the radio industry is really supported by people listening in cars now, outside of the home. Background music and such is being even taken over by streaming services and stuff like that. And you're right, when you can get in your car and you've got a Bluetooth connection from your phone, you can listen to your own music too. So it seems to me that there's a narrower and narrower kind of content window for radio, which to me is pushing towards the spoken word and the synchronous event. So if you're driving, I don't know if you guys can foresee having your baseball game projected in the windshield while your car is driving itself. I expect that is what we're anticipating. But somewhere along the way there, you're probably still going to want to stream audio somehow so that you can hear, a synchronous event. The other thing is, again, if you want to connect with people, I don't know. But there's a couple of first Andrew and then Andrea.
I mean, I think the other issue is that, have you noticed the past few years that they've been bringing back old ideas and like trying to remake everything?
Yes.
Because Hollywood's just running out of ideas, and I think that's what's going to take down Hollywood. It's just, they're going to run out of things to do, and every idea is just going to be rehashed over and over and over until it's just boring. And
It is interesting to see, isn't it? Yeah.
But like, people are going back to records now too and everything, which is ridiculous. They're giant discs. They're not very portable.
I know, but beautiful album art.
Oh yeah.
They're selling them for $30 a crack. It's crazy. Oh, Andrea, do you want to say something? Oh, please, stick with us. Stick with us, please. Yeah.
I just also think that all of this is subjective because we're in San Francisco and there's plenty of other countries where people do listen to the radio. It's not going to go anywhere where people are still watching these. To them, Hollywood film is still something amazing and different. So that's just kind of how I see it too.
It's a very good point. We tend to regard our present as everybody else's future, but it doesn't have to go that way too. I mean, especially considering we seem to be losing, global dominance slowly, or maybe faster and faster. But, that's a very good point. In the past, everything that we did would trickle down everywhere else, but it may not. There may be other countries and cultures that, completely bypass some of the things we do. There's so that's a real interesting idea. Radio. One thing that's wonderful about radio is it's not that expensive to get the technical infrastructure in place. It's certainly nothing like getting cell phone towers everywhere, all the expense of that. So it can be a relatively cheap kind of community medium to put up. Versus I've been hearing about Facebook offering, basically, I don't know if they're actually doing it or not, because there's all kinds of holes in my knowledge, but let's look it up or somehow. Facebook providing cell service in some countries, but with a very limited data access, which basically will give you Facebook and whatever else they want. But basically they'll set you up a cell phone system, but you've got to do all your digital life through Facebook, basically. So given that option, I would rather have a low-tech radio service where it wasn't being controlled by some huge global corporation. So I hear you. I think that's very true. So, yeah. Hollywood's a different story, because Hollywood is a how could I put it? The reason that Hollywood became what it was is drawing talent and money from all over the world and running everything out of this one Los Angeles, industry, and that's been crumbling for quite a while. So, but I don't think that there's a huge loss there. Whatever. What's it for me? Thank you guys for a good discussion. We got many more slides and some other topics to talk about next class. So we'll see you then, and do please get on to charting at least one of your days for media consumption. Okay?